Interest rates will go up and down over the life of your home loan. So if interest rates rise in 2022, how can we best plan for them and other unexpected events so we don't get stuck eating 2-minute noodles for dinner every night?
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to get it right.
I'm Megan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mums. But that's a good thing because between us, we've got over 40 years experience and we are going to share with you bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together, we're going to make sure that you get unbiased and real information that you can rely on so you can get where you want to be without missing a step.
Now, we've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au. There you'll find free checklists that you can download, a free mini course on how to price a property, and our Where to Buy workshop for only $39. Priceless stuff, really.
Bargain. But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, here's the boring bit, the disclaimer. You, of course, know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field of expertise. Now, we've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording, but things change. So check with the relevant government authority or your advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Nice introduction, Megan. And if anybody has watched the blooper reel, they'll realise that I tried to say that 5 times, but Megan had to take over. So today we're talking about how to manage our cash flow in the face of things like interest rate rises, but also major catastrophes, you know, and things that change the trajectory of our lives and also the economy. To help us put a plan in place, we're joined by Terry Condon of Cashflow Co. But before we get into that, there's a special house in Megan's backdrop. What is it? I like this one, Megan.
You like this one?
You might have to move to the side to show us.
We're going to get a widescreen on this. Look at this.
Ooh.
This is Birds in Flight. Or Bird in Flight. It's in San Miguel. On the San Miguel Island in Portugal. Sorry, I was away from my microphone when I said that. Now, it was designed by architect Bernardo Rodriguez, and it is in an area where there's a lot of frequent winds and showers. So there are really interesting protection zones within this house. It's fascinating. If you love architecture, get on and have a look at that one. It's a cracker.
It's beautiful.
Yep.
All right. So if you want to buy one of those houses, you're probably going to get a mortgage.
You need to get started.
You're probably going to have to budget, save, invest. There's all these things.
Lot to do. Now, we have had record low interest rates for some time now. It's been amazing for our ability to borrow more money and to buy, you know, the best that we can possibly afford in terms of a first home. But the honeymoon isn't going to last forever, and it's got us thinking about how we can help you future-proof your cash flow. Our guest today is Terry Condon, and he has a really lovely and really different way of looking at money, which we love. We like bringing you new things to think about. Terry, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, tell us a little bit about the 7 principles in the money mentorship and why it's important for first-time buyers.
Yeah. Before I give you the principles, I'd love to give you, I guess, the theory behind them. Yeah.
Megan goes straight for the jugular.
I do. I get straight to the point.
Get to the point.
I'm well known for it. You know.
No, I love it.
There's not a lot of courtship in my life. I'm just straight to the point.
You know what? I think they're just going to make better sense when we do. So, what I want to say is these principles, they were ideas, and they're ideas that first worked for us, and then there are ideas that we tested with other people. And we've refined these over the last 2.5 years now, working with people all over Australia, because what I found really interesting is certain people have certain ways they like to do things. This works for me, right? And what we try to do is separate out what works for us versus what just works. And so we've kind of been on that mission for the last couple of years, working with people all over the country to try to figure out what that is. And these principles we're kind of sort of talk through, they form the basis of the method that we teach in our program, the money mentorship. And what I would say is they're very counterintuitive. So everything you've kind of been taught, you kind of want to let go of that a little bit, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that you save sustainably. So anyone can save money. Anyone can read a book, follow a prescription. And we define prescriptions as plan on a page, just follow this, do this, automate this, set this up, and then just forget about it. Anyone can do that. And that's really great for you to do when most of the time when your life's very simple. Maybe you're single, you got a fixed income. That works great. I used all those tools. They work fantastic. What we found is people start to struggle in their lives when their lives do shift and change. Maybe you change jobs. Maybe you go into a variable income. Maybe you've got a partner now and you're trying to manage it together and you both you've got your own ideas on how to manage money. And those prescriptions tend to fall down when those changes happen. And I guess the reason we started to focus on this is because we saw a lot of people come to us and the things that they would say to us were just wrong. Like they would internalize the failure as their own character problem. I can't save. Something wrong with me. Instead of actually looking at the system, they're thinking, I've got a self-control problem. And actually, the solution they've used is not fit for purpose anymore. Maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago. And then their life has changed. They're a different person. They've got different circumstances. They're given different constraints. But they're expecting that solution to come with them the whole way. And like I said, prescriptions are great when your life doesn't change. And that's where we need to shift into a practice. That's what we learned, is that you need a practice that moves with your life, that aligns with your values and it fits your goals as well.
So Terry, I'm really looking forward to sort of getting into these 7 practices. What do you call them? 7 principles.
Yeah.
And I've just, as you're talking, I'm reflecting back on my own sort of path as a saver,
the same thing.
Or not. And my answer to saving more, because it's obviously a habit, and you can probably put parallels with going on a diet, really, can't you? That if you eat lots of fatty foods and you don't exercise much, then you're going to put on weight. So you could focus on, I've got to be on a diet, or you could focus on eating less fatty foods and exercising more. And drinking less too, probably. So that's one thing, one way of looking at it. But I look at my ability to save. I don't think I've ever saved anything in my life. I just think I went and upskilled and then earned more. And then I had more money than I sort of needed. And so then it was easier for me to save, So there's that too, isn't there? I mean, the sense that, and then of course, I got onto the property ladder and all the mistakes that Megan and I have shared about our, mistakes along our journey over the years, but also the good decisions that I've made and how they've helped. But you've got to start somewhere, don't you? And so I look back to when I was a non-saver. I'm not sure I could have become a saver when I don't think I earned enough. How do you deal with that?
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because it is a big problem that we see as well, is that people get too focused on just saving as opposed to expanding their skill sets. The easiest way to save more money is to earn more. The easiest way. And so the best
not
investment.
Increase spending. You can't do both at the same time.
That's exactly. And I think that's right. The thing that we see is that you can earn more, but if you don't have a good financial defense, you just leak. You leak money. And what people tend to do is they will tell themselves that story like, oh, I'm just not a saver. And that's actually not true. It's very possible for you to learn how to save, and it's actually very possible for you to enjoy it, believe it or not. It doesn't have to be something that constricts your life. It actually can be something that expands your life if you do it the right way. And that's kind of, I guess that's our whole thesis. If you want to make something sustainable, you've got to make it enjoyable. And that means it has to link with who you are, and it has to align with what you really care about.
It's all very deep, meaningful, isn't it? So,
of great interest to me is there's a bit of a psychological basis to that, and a lot about money and saving and investing actually has got, because it has to be a mindset, doesn't it? It can't be, just put that in there and what are you doing it for?
Absolutely. And
if you pop some money over there and you don't know what it's for, then you're not overly motivated to continue to do that if it hurts your ability to have the lifestyle that you think that you want and should be entitled to.
100%. There's a historian, his name's Will Durant, and his number one insight, this is someone who studied the whole of human history, and nobody knows it better than him. And his number one insight about humans was humans are capable of exceptional things if they will only demand it of themselves. And you need to be able to figure out how to create the conditions to demand it of yourself, to build the desire to be able to do it. Because if you look back on your life, everyone has done something exceptional. Everyone has done it. And what I find really interesting is people tend to be able to, zero in and focus on a home deposit, and then they lose that sort of focus. They don't then like build a bigger picture. And then they go, I just can't seem to save now. I can't manage my mortgage. I don't know what's going on. But for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been doing nothing but that. So it's not a problem of intelligence. It is a problem of commitment. It's a problem of desire. It's a problem of discipline. It's a problem of focus.
Habit, I would think too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. It reminds me of sort of people who diet so they can have nice wedding photos,
Yeah.
And then the wedding's over and they pile on the 20 kilos again.
All right, let's get into it. Take us through this journey then, Terry.
Okay. So let's talk about the thesis here. What we learned, what we've observed is that the way to save sustainably is to spend more intentionally. And what I mean by that is that you want to focus on what you can control. So the way you spend actually dictates whether or not you'll save. So if you think about it like this, right, you can think about it like a spectrum. And I can be very deliberate and intentional on this end, or I can be very impulsive on this end. The more intentional and deliberate I am with my spending, the more likely it is that I'll be saving. So that's kind of the main thing. You want to put the process first, let the outcome take care of itself. And so every principle in our practice they're all designed to help you spend more intentionally, not for you to help you save. And what we find is, as a result of that, people just tend to save a whole lot of money.
Can you give us an example?
Yes, definitely. So there's a family up in Sydney who recently just bought a property in DY. And so we taught them these principles probably about a year and a half ago. And up until that time, they're doing okay. They're saving money. They just don't feel like they're making the progress they could be. They don't know that they're doing the best they absolutely can. And they don't feel, consequently, that they can afford a property because they don't actually have a handle on their cash flows and whether they could afford any kind of mortgage, right? And so when we teach them these principles, it's not even just about the fact that they start to learn how to save and they actually do save better. What they start to do is they start to feel like the thing they want is within their grasp. And because of that, it's almost like they allow themselves to have it. And so I got a message from them maybe sort of, 3 or 4 months ago that was like, man, we could never believe that we could get a property here. We thought we were always going to have to settle and move out to one of these outer suburbs and just live in one of these places that, we don't love. We're on the ladder, we're on the ladder at least, and we have to settle, but we're actually in the place we want to be. Yes, there's some work to do with this property, but we're in the location we really want to be. So I think they're a really good example in a really tough market. The last couple of years in Sydney, crazy. You guys know that better than me.
Yep, absolutely. So you're basically putting that down too. So like turning it on its head, our traditional or conventional wisdom is that you have to focus on saving once your bank balance go up. But you're basically saying that actually, no, you have to make sure that you don't spend your money on shit. And then if you don't spend your money on shit, you're probably going to have more money sitting in your bank account.
Yeah. It's like, my background's sport, right? And all the best coaches say it, you focus on the process and let the outcome take care of itself. So if you're focusing obsessively on your savings rate, you may save. If you're the most dogmatic, obsessive person, you'll probably save, right? But what you're going to be doing is you're going to be shrinking your life. You're going to be shrinking your life, making it smaller and smaller and smaller. Focusing just on saving, it's like stepping on the scales every day and saying, why aren't I losing weight? You might actually do it, but the better way is to actually focus on whether you're eating well and moving more. Those are the things you want to pay attention to. So that's what these principles are all about.
Whether your jeans feel a little bit looser.
I really like the idea of this. It's not just about making sure that you're saving the money, but it's actually about what you're saving it for. So, the intentional spending leads to the intentional saving, but the saving in itself isn't what no one wants.
It's not motivating.
Money in the bank. It's not about that.
Yeah. Well, there's a small proportion of people that do.
Goals.
Yeah, that's true. There is.
Sorry, what was that, Veronica?
There's a small proportion of people that do. I think they call it financial anorexia. They never feel rich enough, and so they just keep watching the balance go up. But that's hopefully that's nobody's listening to this that has that condition. So.
No, but you're right, Megan. You're right. And that is the first principle. It's focus on funding your life goals, not maximizing a savings rate. A savings rate, as you point out, it's an abstract concept that's a number. Like, who cares? Money money in and of itself is boring. But when you start to connect it to you, what you want, where you're going, what kind of life you're trying to live, it starts to become pretty motivating. There's a session we do in our program. We call it Life by Design. We sit down literally for 2 hours with people and we facilitate this session where we draw that out of them. And we want them to put this on a canvas. And then we want them to feel like that is real. And I literally speak it back to them. And I speak it back to them like it's the present. So I'll say, Megan, so it's 2023. You've sat down, you've got this whole thing dialed in and you've done this. You moved out, you moved over here. You guys went on this trip. And on that trip, you were able to do these things you never thought you'd be able to do. Your kids were able to do X, A, B, C, and D. And I take them through the whole thing because I want them to physiologically feel it. And because the reason we do that is because there's some research from a lady called Emily Cronin from Princeton University, I think it is. She did some really interesting research using VR. And the research basically had people have a conversation with a digital render of their future self, a digital render. So it would be me looking at myself, but I would look 10, 20 years older. And I would have a conversation with me. And then they got people to make financial decisions afterwards. And the people that had a conversation with their future selves then were asked decisions like, do you want to, I'm just going to give you an extra $2,000 a month. How much do you want to allocate towards your super? How much you reckon the people that had conversations with their future selves wanted to allocate?
So is this actually not the content of the conversation, but just the simple fact that then makes the idea that I'm going to be around in 20 years and need that money more real?
Yep. So people, if you don't empathize with your future self, you won't look after that person.
Won't look after
and
them.
so what is the easiest way to empathize with? Exactly. So what's the easiest way to empathize with future you? Actually set the goal, see yourself there, and then look back on you. So what we do is we draw that out and we speak it back to people. And then I tell them everything we just put down on the canvas. I want you to write a letter from future you to present you, thanking you for what you're about to do. And that changes people's ideas around money. That takes money from numbers to a tool.
Also changes it from a handbag today to a how much
exactly.
compounding effect would it have if I didn't spend that $3,000 today?
And the reason why that's the case is because it now surfaces trade-offs. This is super important, something we've learned. We know this already. Decision science tells us that we make better decisions when we think about trade-offs, this or that, not have this or not have it. So if I don't have the goal and I don't have the bigger picture vision of my life, right, then that handbag you're just talking about there, Megan, it's a decision between to have or not have. That's a very constricting conversation. That's to
have's going to win, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly if you've worked hard for it and you feel like it's time that you had a reward.
Oh, that's hilarious.
You're a human, and what do humans do? They will rationally value the present over the future because the present's certain, the future is uncertain. But the more you can actually see that future, now you surface the trade-off. So it's not a decision of have or not have the bag. The decision now is to have the bag or to have the house. And as soon as I do that, I think much clearer. I'm going out of my animal brain. I'm going into my human brain.
That's quite fascinating. So did you bring all the sports psychology into this?
Yeah, well, you were a strength and conditioning coach?
I was, yeah. But what I learned in my role as a coach was I was working with people between the ears more than I was anything else. Yeah. So I had to understand behavior very well, right? Because my job is to get you're an elite athlete, you're at the top of your field, but I've got to get you better. And how am I going to get you to do that? Everything's already going really well for you. Everyone's got this misconception that every elite athlete is just 100% motivated every single day to just drill it and just do the absolute most. It's actually not the case. There are a lot of people that are very talented and they're making great money and they're actually not reaching their potential. And it's your job to get them there. So for me, I learned very quickly, and probably a part of this was because I was so young, right? I had all the accumulated knowledge. I walked in when I was 24 and I remember knocking on the door of the Richmond Football Club. And if you're in Melbourne, Richmond Football Club is one of the AFL teams. And I knock on the door thinking, hey, how good am I? I've made it. I'm 24. I'm at the top level of my field. How good am I? And the door opens and I look up. I keep looking up. And it's Matthew Richardson. So Matthew Richardson is like, I don't know, Sonny Bill Williams for the rugby people in Sydney, right? And Matthew Richardson at that time is 34 years old and I'm 24. And now I'm in charge of him and I'm going to be telling him what to do. And so I learned very quickly in that moment, actually what I know means dick. Doesn't matter if I've got the specialized knowledge, how I get it across to you and whether you commit to it is the difference, because you could be compliant or you could commit. And the difference is, in terms of performance, is commitment. How do I get you to commit? So at that point,
internalizing the need, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So at that point I was like, wow, I'm gonna look around, and I'm in this elite environment now. I'm going to focus on what do the best coaches do and how they act differently. What do they know? So it was like this laboratory where every day I got to go in and try these different ideas, watch and observe, learn and practice basically, and understand what is it that makes people achieve their goals and how do they change their behavior and what makes them stick to the boring stuff for long enough to get the big results. Because that's essentially what it is. That's all it is.
Doing the work.
Yeah.
Consistently. Yeah.
Silver bullets.
But actually, consistency is not necessarily one of your fundamentals or one of your principles, because you actually talk about calibrating money monthly, not just set and forget. So consistency is not just about do it the same way every time, all the time.
Yes, good point. That is the second principle. So we say calibrate monthly, don't set and forget. So again, I'll go back to those prescriptions. A prescription will tell you just set up these percentages, average percentages, just put this in place and then just forget about it. Go back, don't think about your money, just go and do your thing. And we're saying, no, sit down, calibrate your money monthly. And the reason we say that is because when you actually do that, you get a chance, an opportunity, if you like, to acknowledge what you have made and what you want it to do for you. And so when you automate your money, and I'll talk about another one of these principles a bit later on, it's a little bit similar, but different. When you set and forget, you're moving away from your money. You're actually not thinking about it as a tool at all. It's something that's just kind of running away there in the background. So when you sit down and do it, you get a real sense for what is coming up and how you're going to map your money to that month. And that's really important, because when you do sit down, calibrate it, you can kind of see what is coming up. So the classic one that trips people up is, oh man, that rego bill just come in. It's $800. All right. Now the prescription, that's where the prescription doesn't work. You're like, because it's not the average month. You had 2 or 3 bigger bills and it's come in, and now you think, oh man, I just can't do this savings thing. But when you look at the actual month, you'll see it. And I'm kind of overlapping here because there's another one that's like, what's the next principle, which is like plan for the actual month, not the average month. So we'll just cover.
Let's roll that in, because I think that's an important one, because some other theories suggest that you kind of extrapolate over the 12-month period and plan for that registration that would come in a certain month, but you would have built up in perhaps a separate account, a bills account for want of a better word. It was how I was taught when I first went into real estate, and you don't have a very high, actually back then you didn't have any base salary and all you earned was commission. So there was a advisory company out there that was trying to help real estate agents not end up in a hole because they spent all their money one month and then didn't have any money the next month because the commission wasn't coming in. So I digress. But the idea being that the old models talk about doing that over, kind of making it happen over a 12-month period. Yeah. But your idea and what you teach is you actually plan your cash flow. Cash flow? Is that the best way of putting it?
Plan your money, map it to the actual
money for the month that's coming up.
Yeah. And the reason we say that, again, this is actually not what we think anymore. It's what we've seen. It's actually how people respond to what happens. Okay. So there's a guy, you guys have probably heard of this guy, Herbert Simon. He's an economist. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winning economist. That's a mouthful. And he came up with the idea of satisficing. So satisficing, most people know this, but it's the idea that you can either, let me get the wording right here. You can find optimal solutions for a simplified reality, which is essentially what you're saying. You simplify reality and you come up with very specific, a percentage, do this percentage, put it here, do that. That is you finding a specific optimized number for a simplified reality. Okay. The other way to satisfy us is to find satisfactory solutions for a more realistic world. Here's why we advocate for the second. The reason is when you actually deal with a realistic world, you can deal with what comes up constructively as opposed to reactively. So if you're on those prescriptions and then the month is it's not the average month, it's an out of average month. Now you feel like, this plan doesn't work. Something wrong with me. I can't do this. I've got a self-control problem. This saving stuff sucks. I'm failing. BJ Fogg is the reason that we're all addicted to Instagram. He's the guy that made it addictive, right? And he wrote a book called Tiny Habits, and he's got a behavior framework, and he literally shows you on a map what makes people do stuff. And do you want to know his number one insight from all of his research at Stanford and with all these addictive apps about what changes people's behavior?
Yes, I want to know.
I'll tell you what it is. It is, we don't change by feeling bad. We change by feeling good.
Ooh.
So when things work out, when our plan works out, when we work our plan, we do this and we're getting better, we're feeling good.
You want to do more of it?
And our brain encodes that. It's literally a dopamine response, and the brain's like, give me more of that. Right? The thing I learned when I was working with an athlete was it's not my job to motivate them. My job was to string together very quick, short wins. So they felt this sense of momentum. And I knew that when I could get them to a certain point where they see that progress, I don't motivate anyone. I only create the conditions for people to get motivated. And so that is why we flip it on its head and we do it the other way, because we saw the people coming to us saying, we just can't seem to work out how to save money. They're feeling bad. And they jump off those bandwagons. They're like, yo-yo dieters. I'm going to be on the barefoot bucket system 1 month. I might be on the 50-30-20 another month. And they're just like, I can't do it. There's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. You're a human and you've got a very dynamic life. Your life changes, it moves, it shifts. And so you should move with your life. Right. So our unifying theory is that the way to save sustainably is actually to spend more intentionally.
Interesting observation. All right. Can I get you to move now? So we talked about planning for the actual month. What about when you're allocating money? Because this is a really interesting way of doing things.
I actually love this. But before that, earlier you said, Megan, about consistency, and that, setting up for set and forget type systems feels like it's consistent, but I guess it's your counterintuitive approach, isn't it? The consistency is actually the reviewing on a regular basis. That's the consistency. So, I love that. And this, I know what you're coming up with now, and I love this. So stay tuned, everybody. Go, Terry, tell us all about it.
Okay, so the next principle is when you are sitting down and you're mapping your money to the month and you're mapping it to the actual month, not the average month, what you want to be doing, the money that you want to be mapping, you want to be allocating old money, not new money. Now, I know nobody thinks about money as old and new.
No.
Let's do that.
I do think old money being, people have had money in their generation for generations. Yeah. That's old money.
So I could just say this a bit more simply and say old money is money that you've kept. It's the money you already have on hand. All right. New money is money that's coming in. Okay.
So you haven't received it yet? So it's what you've got in your hands versus what you think is going to come in for the month.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're not setting up your plan thinking I'm going to make 11, 12, 14, 15 grand this month. You're setting up your plan saying last month I had 10 grand and that's the 10 grand I'm going to be mapping for this month. Does that make sense? Yeah. So let me explain why this is important. We have a family come to us and these guys are such good people, just soul of the earth people. So these guys are super stressed, working really hard, and they've been working with a company that's been trying to help them with their money. But the model they've been working with is basically hand over control of your money and we'll take control of everything. We'll pay all your bills for you and we'll give you a stipend that you live on.
Okay.
And so it's kind of it is that fat camp kind of mentality, we control everything. It's that Biggest Loser model.
Control the calories.
Yeah. It's, while you're with us, you're going to be fine. And the problem was they were just super, super stressed. They're like, we don't know where we're at. We don't know. We feel like we're working really hard. We don't know what's going on. We don't know where our money is. And so we sat down with them and we actually consolidated everything and we showed them where their money was. We showed them how much they had and how much they felt they had versus how much they actually had were so far different. They're so different. So on paper, these guys were well north of $1 million. But where the money was, where it was configured and how it was being used, not helping them at all. And so one of the biggest changes we made was obviously, let's take back control of your money. But we taught them this model of actually, decoupling money coming in from money going out. And so the reason that matters is because if you're spending as it's coming in, it feels like you're trying to grasp sand that's falling through your fingers. Yeah. But if you are spending money you already have, it's not moving. It's sitting right in front of you. You can make very deliberate, very intentional decisions about what you have and what you want it to do for you. Now, we talked before about BJ Fogg, his number one insight. You guys remember what it was?
People do things when they feel good about it.
Good about them, yeah.
Exactly.
As opposed to when they feel bad.
She's got a way better memory than I do.
So here's an interesting side effect of this method. We've had people say to us, I kind of feel weird when I don't do it. I feel great when I do this. I feel great. I feel fantastic. We're like, what? Why is this? And it turns out the reason is because it's a very practical way to practice gratitude, right? When you think about it. If you're mapping old money that you made last month, you're basically saying last month, everything we did brought us in, let's say $10,000. And what do we want that $10,000 to do for us? Where are we going to allocate that money? And how should that reflect what we want? So remember that big picture view. This is where you make the conscious, deliberate decision every month to make that money do that for you. And so when you slow it down like this, people actually start to focus on what they have, what they want it to do for them, which means they're not focusing on what they don't have and what they wish they could do. So your brain is like a chute, and it will put its focus where you point it. And if you point it at the right things, you get a very different result. And so what's happening is people are continuously seeing, hey, we got all this money and this is what it's doing for us. So that changes the way you feel about money, which means you think more clearly about it. And the other interesting thing about this is when you pull money as it's coming in, it pulls and it sits and it builds in an account. Guess what that does?
Well, I would say ad grows in value because of interest rates, except it doesn't, right? What does it do?
It doesn't.
I would imagine it helps you sleep better at night. Like I'm thinking of this from a pure emotional and
security and safety.
Yeah, all those sorts of things. There's a lot more than just money that we're talking about here, aren't we? Because it's if you're focusing on what I don't have, often that causes sleeplessness, and that leads to exhaustion, and then things become heightened and more significant when you're tired and you're stressed. And if you have got a bit of control over how you're thinking about things and your mindset's in the right place, then a lot of other things become less difficult to deal with. I don't know if 100%. That's the path you were going down, but that's the path that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
It's, it's slightly different, but you're not wrong. And I'll tell you how right you are. So there is a bunch of research. I think it's Harvard. Don't quote me on this. I'll find it for you if you want me to find it. And it shows that if you feel financially stressed, your IQ drops by 11 points.
Oh, yeah.
11 points.
I've read that one. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the amount was, but I certainly know. And even, Veronica, you and I, when things are really, up and down in our businesses, you're in this almost cycle, like this hamster wheel cycle of how am I going to get out of this? What have I got to do? And at a really micro level, when that's your household, it has to impact how you think and feel.
Well, it closes down your options, your available options, doesn't it? Because when we're under stress, we narrow instantly. It was our monkey brains, which part of our animal brain narrows down the focus. And so we actually feel like we have less options to choose from than when we're actually calm. And I guess if you've got money in the bank and you're not sort of staring at a big red number or, then you're going to naturally feel calmer than if you are, financially stressed. So that makes perfect sense. And we talk about, like, in the PACE model, in terms of your first home buyer guide, step 5 out of 10 steps is revise and correct. It's slow down. I love the fact you say slow down. Everyone, particularly in a rising property market, and even now we're talking about interest rates potentially going up and how to actually protect yourself against that. And one of the things that people will do when interest rates are going up, they'll be aware that basically their borrowing capacity is going to be restricted. When interest rates go up, you can borrow less money. And so there will be this sort of mad panic. I've got to get in, I've got to buy it out. And this sort of takes over our heads, and we're not actually making rational decisions at all. So this is all very, very aligned, with the whole purchasing property hunting, and etc., throughout life. So come on, you look like you're bursting to continue telling us
this
what
we've just
happens.
Thrown our thought. Well, you asked the question, so you know.
No,
if you've watched any of our podcasts, you know we're going to tell you what we think.
Love it. No, so here's what happens as well, and it's just something we've noticed after a couple of years. People start to optimize their incomes because now every month they're actually seeing, particularly if you're in a couple, you're actually seeing together, we made this much last month. Something called the Hawthorne Effect. You already know what the Hawthorne Effect is, right? If you've ever used a step counter and you've been looking for opportunities to find new steps, the Hawthorne Effect is when you shine a light on something, you'll tend to optimize it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what this does is that every month it's showing you what you're earning. And so people start to go, imagine if we had another $500 a month. That's another $6,000 a year. What could the $6,000 a year do? And how much work do we have to do to make an extra $500? Well, not much. We could probably sell a few things. Maybe you could do a bit of this. And so you start to see people, this is what I like about it, right? It's not just financial defense. Now people start thinking more offensively, more opportunistically, and start thinking more expansively as well.
Love it. Ooh. So it fills in with possibility.
Yep.
All of a sudden their minds expand.
Focus too, Veronica, like possibility is one thing, but if your focus is on, in this case, saving for your deposit on your first home or, first property,
continue to pay your mortgage.
or actually making sure that you don't fall behind in paying your mortgage. If you get on the front foot, then when interest rates do rise, and look, there's all the indicators are that something's going to happen this year, and every bank and every economist and everyone can say what they think's going to happen, but let's just assume that it's going to go up, because then if you assume and you plan for it, then you don't have the sleepless nights. So this is a way of actually getting in front of that, so that you're not going, oh my God, it's another 0.25%, it's another 25 basis points, it's another, the bank put it up, but the Reserve Bank didn't. Okay, well, so what? You've budgeted for it, you've worked it out, you know that you have the ability in your old money, not your new money, to get through that rate rise.
It might not be interest rates. It could just be orthodontic bills or something. I mean, you get caught out quite often with, or could be just, something. You need a new roof that you weren't expecting. We just had torrential rain in Sydney. There'll be a few new roofs, I would imagine.
Oh my goodness, a month's worth of rain in Brisbane in 24 hours. We're recording this at the end of February. Anyway, let's move on to...
Yeah, I wanted, before we talk about that though, before we move on to number 6, I think it is, we're up to, you're talking about allocating old money to money that's still in the account from last month, as opposed to budgeting what you're going to earn this month. How does that sit in with what a lot of, I know a lot of mortgage brokers, for instance, encourage their clients to do this, which is set up offset accounts and then actually live off their credit card and then pay the credit card off. And they say you get 1 month's interest free, and true you do, but you only get 1 month for free for 1 month ever. What do you say about that?
Yeah, so Ryan, my offside, is much better at doing this than I am. He's more of a numbers guy.
Why are we talking to him?
You on instead of him?
I don't know. You can talk to him. He's a bit more boring. But anyway, usually what we do is we run the numbers on that, and we basically say, look, so you might save, don't quote me on this, but it might be like $200 a year, okay? And what we've usually seen is that people save a lot more than $200 a year when they manage their money better. A lot more. So we basically say, what is the opportunity cost of that? And usually it doesn't line up, because you being more deliberate with it. The other thing about this principle is that when you do allocate the old money, you do it in the right order. So Megan, we all know that principle will pay yourself first. We actually have those accounts set up. Those goals are there. They're containers that we fill up. Like we literally pour it into those containers before we start talking about paying the bills or anything like that. And so that's not automated. We want you to do it deliberately, because we want you to take that action. And so
it's funny.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So it is. It's quite counter to some of the automated models. Yeah. Where it just goes, it goes into an account or goes straight into a particular account that is for the bills or the slush fund or the mortgage, whatever it might be.
It does come back to that intentionality, doesn't it? Because at the end of the day, if you set everything up automatically, it sounds logical, because then if you don't know it, you don't see it, you don't get used to touching it. And what you're sort of suggesting, if I'm putting words in your mouth, is that if you do actively do this, then you are going to have more of a connection to what you're doing. as opposed to the temptation to actually reallocate it and siphon it somewhere else.
Yeah. And I would suggest the value of doing it far exceeds the $200 you might save in interest each year.
Is that because, going back to that ideology that if you see the successes, you're more inclined to commit to the successes. So if you're actually allocating the money each month rather than being an automatic process, you're actually seeing what's left in the account or what potentially is moved to the savings account as you intentionally move it. Is that positive reinforcement that you talk about, that when your brain switches to that positive state of mind and all the endorphins that come with that and the positivity around that?
You don't get that if you automate.
Negativity of we've only got $500 left this month.
Yeah. So remember I said before, we're trying to find as many ways to make you feel good as possible. And so you miss a very valuable opportunity every month to feel great by tipping into those goals and seeing that progress.
It's a dopamine ticking the box.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
All
and
right.
particularly, money is such a source of distress and conflict between couples. So if you can do this together in a positive way, that's almost like, there's a little bit of couples therapy that can happen through this process as well.
Yeah.
The positive reinforcement.
I'm really glad you brought that up. And I would say this is probably the best impact we have is with couples. Is because when you go through this process, and like it probably sounds really onerous, right? We're saying, no, stop, slow down. Do you know what? It takes 15 minutes or less.
I was going to say, it's probably once you sit down, this is the time we're doing, the kids are in bed, it would probably be a small period of time.
Yeah. You have a tool. It's not you sitting down with a calculator. It's a tool that runs all the numbers for you. It's you acting as a CEO of your life, not the CFO. We don't want you to be a CFO. We want you to be a CEO who's making high quality decisions with great information. And so the point with couples is that this is such great modeling. For me, it's the perverse thing that I love is that when we work with a couple and I tell them this, I'm actually helping your kid, because when they see you collaborating around money and making, having very deliberate, very constructive conversations around money, guess what? They're not going to grow up feeling around money afraid. And most parents connect with that and they go, that's exactly why I haven't bothered with this until now, is because I felt bad about money,
How cool.
It is. It's positive role modeling in an area that isn't taught, or we're not good at teaching it because we're fearful of it, and often it's in a negative space and in a conflict zone as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you hear all these chat about money personalities or your money type. Do you subscribe to that thinking?
Look, I think those models are useful, and we have we kind of talk about 4 different financial alter egos. It's really just useful for you to understand yourself a little bit, but it doesn't change anything. What changes is a tool and then repeated behavior and exposure. So this is what we say to couples that really feel stressed about this. We're like, every month is another rep, and every rep is another opportunity for you to change the way you feel about money. And every month is more evidence that you collect that you two can work together effectively around your money. That's how you change things.
Yeah, I love it. So it's basically you can have a blowout, but like if you reset every month, it's okay. I had a blowout last month, and this month we're back. We know what to do. I'm back onto it. Yeah. Okay, number 6.
Good segue. That's a good segue to number 6 because it's. So review your money monthly. All right, not annually or never. Most people, they put those set and forget things in, and then they just go, I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years and I don't know if it's working for me. We're basically saying, no, every month. And again, this doesn't take long. This can take 5 minutes for you to look back through it and actually look at what you intended to happen versus what actually happened. They very rarely marry up 100%, right? Yeah. It's not about getting it right. What it's about is about having a plan, doing your best to work with reality, to work with, constructively with reality to make that plan work. So, you're a couple $100 off. Who cares? Across the year, you're fine. You're 100% fine, right? And so the reason this matters, and it's exactly what you just said, Ronia, if you review this monthly, what you're essentially doing is you're turning an infinite game, a game that doesn't feel like it ever ends. You're turning it into a finite game. And guess what? Finite games are winnable. So it means that you can have that game, you can have that good feeling, that win. But by the same token, if you don't win, you can wipe the slate clean and you can go again. You don't have to have that. They talk about this in positive psychology, that sort of sense of failure where people internalize it. They think it's personal, it's permanent, and it's pervasive. Yeah. It stops that. it stops that, and it's a circuit breaker for that. And you sort of go, wipe the slate clean. You've got another chance to have another go.
It's a learning opportunity too, isn't it? Like, what did we do then that we hadn't anticipated, or who blew it out? Do we need to change the way that we look at that? Yeah. There are spenders and savers, and I don't know a single couple that I've ever worked with in buyer's agency in 18 years where there wasn't a spender and a saver. And those two ideologies are often in conflict, and they are, a source of great debate and battle over time. So we can't discount the fact that these different ideologies exist.
My wife's a spender, I'm a saver.
Reward them differently.
My wife's a spender and I'm a saver.
So and she's an intentional spender, I'm presuming.
Does she have a slush fund? Does she have an allocation? Is there a way that she can have that dopamine hit that comes from spending money without interrupting the flow of cash and the big picture goals?
Yeah, so we do. We give couples have their own accounts, and you can do whatever you want in your own account. It's not on anyone to tell anyone else how to spend their money. But when we where we have responsibilities together, we manage that together. And so people like that because they're like, well, I still get to be me. I still get to, I still get to blow all my cash on the first week of the month if I want to.
Bring on the new suit.
Did I get all the numbers out of order, or is there a seventh?
Oh, there's one I missed.
So work with real numbers, not arbitrary, was one that we did skip.
Yeah. Do you want to do that one?
Yeah.
Let's round it out.
This is, we got the numbers all out of order, but this is the seventh. Whether it's number 7 or not doesn't really matter.
So unlike the pay system where you must follow each step in order,
this is all of it's important.
To get these principles not in order.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your reviewing is the last thing you do, but when you are working with real numbers, we talked about allocating old money, not automating new money. So when you're allocating, allocate real numbers. Actually put a dollar figure to it. Don't say 20% here, 30% there, 50% there. And the reason we say that is because when you use a percentage, it creates what's called abstraction. Abstraction happens when we feel a cognitive distance between our decision or behavior and the actual reality of the situation. And so the classic example of this, and it's very extreme, but like Nazi Germany happened because so people are in a tower saying we need to, fix our population problem, and they're making horrific decisions that they're not on the ground. They're not actually seeing the reality of what's going on. And so when you abstract away the actual reality of your behavior, you can actually delude yourself and deceive yourself in very dangerous ways. So I know that's extreme, but I only give that example because I think most people think, it's not a big deal. But this is the thing. So there's a family that come in working with us, and and after about 6 months, I get a phone call, and the phone call's like, dude, we've been spending $800 a month on alcohol, and we've been trying to get fit and healthy. That's like our number one goal for this year. And you don't know that if you're not working with real numbers, right?
Yeah.
You just know percentages. And so you can kind of deceive yourself about what's actually going on. And so when you work with those real numbers and you're mapping that real money, that old money, you can actually say, I am allocating this much to that. And does that align with what actually we care about? What actually we want, who actually we are, and where we're trying to get to. And so
because 10% doesn't sound as much as $800.
Yes.
Yeah. When you use a percentage, if you up your income, you actually lose the opportunity to make hay where the sun shines because your spending goes up with it. Whereas, like Megan said before, you actually want to be going, that extra, I get to put that away. And so if you're working with percentages, it all moves up together. And you actually don't actually maximize your situation.
Interesting stuff. So all of this approach really can help give you more confidence with money, as well as help you sleep better at night, but also actually, if you do it, follow it, should give you more money. So, I mean, that's all sounds pretty positive. And, once you've actually got yourself a mortgage, you're going to want to feel you want to sleep at night. A lot of first-home buyers really have this mental it's a huge challenge of taking on a mortgage for the first time. Do you know, in my business, some of my first home buyers are actually in their 50s, and they've never before had a mortgage. And that is probably even harder, I think, potentially. But to stare down the barrel of that huge debt, can be really challenging. So I think to take control in a really proactive way like this of your money, I think is really, really important to help you not freak out so much by the huge number of your debt.
Oh yeah, I think the reason that happens is because a lot of people associate money, and this is how I've been conditioned. Money is security, and so have money, feel secure. Don't have money, not secure. Yeah. So I'm sitting on, for me, before I kind of really got into this stuff and really understood it, I'm sitting on a massive pile of cash for like 2 or 3 years, knowing intellectually that I should be investing it, but emotionally feeling like I couldn't do that because then I'm putting my money in the hands of others, and that would make me insecure. And so what I've found through the process of kind of doing this practice is that I kind of loosen my grip on money a little bit, and I make very different decisions now. I make more good life investments, I would say. I'll give you a good example of this. We did quite well last year. We, in a quite a short period, we saved a good chunk of cash, and it was ordained for the investment portfolio. And I was like, yes, this is going to actually be a massive boost. We've killed it here. And I had this thought, and I realized, our kids, our twins, they're 3.5, and they're only going to be 3.5 once, and they're only going to be kids once. And something we talk about in the program, we have different kind of principles we follow. We always say memorable experiences over meaningless possessions, and then time over money. So spend great time with people that you care about, having memorable experiences. And I thought, like, why do I have to put it in the portfolio and wait 10 years to then have a great experience? I don't have to. Actually, I can buy that now. So we went out, and the money that we were going to put in the portfolio, then we put that straight into a camper trailer. And the camper trailer is going to be basically our vehicle for the next 10 years of memories for the family. Now, if you had said that I would have done that 5 years ago, I would have said, you're dreaming. You're dreaming. I would have done it because that money, that was all about the future. It was all about security. And when you get on top of your money this way, you start to have this sense of like, you know what? Money's coming in every month. Actually, there hasn't been a month in the last 30 years I've been making money that there hasn't been money coming in. So why am I acting like it's scarce? It's not scarce. Time is scarce, and time with the people you love is scarce. And if you're not making the most of your money, then what's the point? Like that should be a vehicle. That is wealth for me. Time spent with people you care about.
Is it almost finding the right balance between living now but planning for the future? So it's not always about planning for the future and what is it that we want in our retirement or when the children are older. It's actually and you said it earlier when we were talking, changing the way you feel about money. So making sure that, as you say, we have these opportunities to build memories and to have the time with the people that we love at the time of their life, which is now, not just wait until they're teenagers and perhaps don't want to talk to us and come in a camper trailer because we feel like we're financially secure enough to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Those windows are closing every day. We're just not aware of it. We're not really paying attention. That's why we say slow down. Think about this for a second. Because, yes, you need to find that balance. There's actually times in our program where we tell people, guys, you're holding too tight here. You're actually going too hard. And if you keep going this way, guess what you're going to do in about 3 to 4 months? You'll make some silly impulse purchase that doesn't reflect anything you want. And it'll be the subconscious part of you pushing back.
So it's like giving yourself a little safety valves along the way as well to give yourself permission to actually enjoy the moment and not let life pass you by. It's been such an interesting chat. It's actually quite different in flavour to what certainly, me and I were talking about at the outset, that we need to give people some good principles.
We're going to change the title of this podcast right now.
I hope it's been a positive change.
Do you know what I took from this? It's humanising why we manage our money.
Yeah.
Instead of monetising why we manage our money.
Yeah, life isn't lived in a spreadsheet.
Yeah, and also taking the focus off that accumulation or the numbers, measuring success by numbers in your bank account or a number of properties you own or those sort of really numeric, really meaningless sort of measurements. This is really about quality of life and making, like you said, the camper trailer is one thing, but it was an intentional decision. As you said, you really thought it through and you challenged your own, preconceived ideas to what you're going to do with it. Now, I know that off air, Terry, you told me that you guys have just bought your first home to live in. You've had property as investments, but you've recently just bought your first home. A question that we ask all of our guests is, what is one thing that you know now that you wish you knew as a first home buyer? And given that you actually literally, as we speak, are a first home buyer, perhaps you could share with us, maybe a distinction between how you felt or how you went about buying your own home versus buying an investment property. You want to give us just an insight on that one?
That's a good question. The investment property was, it was all numbers, and it was all, and I would say that those decisions were actually quite shit when I look back on them.
Shouldn't laugh, but if we have another can we get
good? I love
to tell us about that?
Yeah, no, seriously, they were really bad decisions. But you know what? Like, I consider all that as education. I understood who I was as an investor as a result of those, and I think I talked about this on the Elephant in the Room. I talked about that. Yeah.
So anyone wants to listen to that episode, I'll look it up while you're talking to me.
So have a listen to that if you want the full story. But I guess what I learned there was, like, we were just trying to optimize, and again, like, we were just like trying to make the numbers work, and also I'd say there was a lot more short-term type thinking in that decision. Whereas this home decision for me, it actually was one that I came to pretty quickly. It wasn't on our plan. It actually wasn't on our plan for 3 to 5 years. So we're really more focused on building the business up as an asset first. And the business is going pretty good, pretty happy with it. The thing that changed for us, and the thing that changed my calculus, was 2020, 2021, and seeing what the result of that government stimulus, and knowing that if that happened again, it would only be harder. Because that excess money that comes into the supply, it chases a constrained stock of housing in Australia, and nobody's going to fix that anytime soon. And so the prices keep getting bid up. And so I realized, look, if my living costs are going to keep going up anyway, I can anticipate my rent's going to go up if I stay renting. I may as well live in a place I like. I can call my home. And actually, I want well-structured debt to protect me from inflation as opposed to being punished by it. And so I kind of went, well, you know what, let's do it. And then within 6 weeks, we owned a house. But we went very slow to go fast. So every single week, I would be out. I would be going to open homes, and it's probably the benefit of being a business owner is I can go to open home at any time. And I went to heaps. And what I learned, your question was, what did I learn? Probably the most important thing I learned is there is no such thing as the market. There is a market on a weekend. There is a market in a suburb. There is a market post that news article, and it always changes. And so there's opportunities within that volatility if you are ready. And that's what happened for us. We were ready at the right time, and we actually were able to take our property take it off the market before the auction. And, I'm happy to say we bought it for about 45 grand less than I would have paid at auction. And so for me, what happened was we went slow to go fast. We had all the conditions ready. We had everything right to go. And then when everything lined up for us, we moved very quickly and we made that decision. But the thing I learned was there is great opportunity if you're willing to, get your hands very dirty and just do the work to be able to get a sense. Because I could see one weekend to another weekend, I'm like, this is a completely different sentiment. That's a different kind of buyer. They're acting completely differently. The demographics are different. And then I could see in the different suburbs how that was shifting and changing as well. So what I learned, the lesson is there is no market. You just have to keep going and, getting right amongst it, I guess.
It's immersion, isn't it? And immersion isn't as necessary in a slow-moving buyer's market, but immersion and understanding different behaviour and effects on people, and sentiment, as you say, is so impactful on people. And often what's written in the paper in the morning, what they hear on the radio, what the latest bank forecast is, these things affect things very short term. And if you, as you say, you've prepared, you've gone slow and you're ready to act fast, that is a powerful position to be in as a first home buyer in an unstable market.
Absolutely. I think there's great opportunities. And I totally, to be honest, I really have been kind of resistant for the whole home ownership thing. I feel like too many people just get into it and they just sort of like, they're almost like lambs to the slaughter, just being led down these lines to shitty properties. And it's just like, we've got to get on, that word, we've got to get on the ladder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've been one who's just been like, listen, I'll do what I want. And then I had to acknowledge I had to be practical post-COVID. I was like, listen, all right, we should probably do this now because we probably couldn't afford for that to happen again. Because if it did, it might be out of our reach.
Yeah.
And I only knew that because we're all over our cash flows. I'm like, we can do this now. We can do it. We can act very quickly. And we had the right team around us. That's the other thing I'd say. Have great people around you. It makes the biggest difference.
Well, that is so good. And that is number one in our pay system is actually getting your support crew sorted. So you're spot on there. That's a great story. And I think that what is important, like you say, slow down to move fast and be prepared and do all your research, immerse yourself, understand what's going on, realize that there's not one market, there's markets within markets and, and then things change. And it's all of that, that people want to take shortcuts. And it comes back to what we said at the very outset, which is doing the work. You have to do the work and it's worth it to be confident with the decision you make. So you're not like one of those little sheep going to be dunked in the sheep dip with everybody else. Anyway.
Hey, if I can plug you guys here for a second, the value of the right people around you, I can't overstate it. The thing you have to realize, I think, in real estate is that if you're an outsider, you are playing a zero-sum game. And that means someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. If you have access to insiders, you get to play a positive-sum game, which means there are long-term relationships that Veronica has with different estate agents. And they know they're going to look after her. She's going to look after them. They're not going to screw you over because you're in with her. All right. So that's a pretty important thing to understand, right? You've got to understand the incentives of the marketplace you're in. It can be very transactional. And unless and until you put an offer in, you're just another number. And estate agents don't give a shit about you.
You're a tie kicker.
Yeah. And so you've got to change that story. And the more you can do that and the more you can get yourself from that sort of zero sum, winner take all, sort of someone wins, someone loses, get it to more of a positive sum game, you're going to do so much better. Like we had such valuable information from our buyer's advocate down here. Like we had inside information that I could never have paid for. And I knew when we were bidding, I actually knew where the other guy was at.
Yeah.
And so I knew when I could tell his increments, and when he started coming down, I knew where he was at. And then we went up. And we went up because I wanted to tell a very specific story, which is there's plenty more powder here, buddy. May as well give up.
Love the psychology of bidding and making offers in different increments. But anyway, that's another podcast as well. Terry, that's been great. Thank you so much. I know that you've we'll put the link to your website in the show notes if people want to check out what you do. And really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Loved coming on. And maybe I can just quickly give my podcast a plug as well.
Oh, sure. Go for it. Only if you let us on it. Are you going to let us on and help your listeners?
We're going to be doing a real estate series soon. So I think we talked about that. And I'd love to have you guys on. Yeah.
Great. So what's your podcast?
Passive Income Project. If you listen to season 1, that's an audio course. That'll take you from, I don't really get this money thing to, enough to be dangerous.
Sounds cool. I hate the name of your podcast. Now I remember we discussed it actually on the Elephant in the Room. And it's like, the passive income sounds like all those dodgy property spruikers. But
does sound a little spruikerish.
But it's not about that, is it?
Yeah,
it's a mercenary title. It's one people search for.
So, clickbait, guys. Clickbait.
I see.
SEO. All right. Well, we'll see you there.
All right, thank you guys.
That was fantastic. There's a lot of really good stuff in there, and I like the way that you approach things. You've obviously brought a lot from your work with sports people, and I quite enjoy that side of it. But how you actually turn a negative into a positive from a mindset point of view is great.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's definitely a combination. So Ryan's my business partner, and we've got very different complementary skills. He brings a very good sound technical knowledge to it. And we sort of complement that with the behavioral understanding. And that's kind of how we've come up with something different, I guess.
Right.
In this episode, we've covered a very small part of our 10-step online course for first-time buyers. If you would like to learn more about the process and how to buy without making a mistake, then head over to our website, www.homebuyeracademy.com.au. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you like what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. 5 stars would be wonderful. It will help others find us as well.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with some more priceless stuff.